Haas writes, "1,000 words and 1,000 images cannot describe it. That's not because of the weakness of words and photos, but because of the ability of most Israelis not to see and not to grasp the extent of the vineyards and groves and orchards and fields that the People's Army of Israel turned into desert, the green that it painted yellow and gray, the sand turned over, and the exposed land, the thorns, the weeds. To ensure the safety of the settlers, the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, spent 5 years uprooting the green lungs of Gaza, mutilating its most beautiful areas, and cutting off the livelihood of tens of thousands of families. The Israeli talent for ignoring the enormous destruction that we caused leads to the wrong political assessments. Ignoring it enables the IDF to continue destroying Palestinian territory in the West Bank, along the separation fence, around the settlements, in the Jordan Valley. The destruction goes on as a means to continue creating facts on the ground and to guarantee that the future Palestinian entity remains as divided and split and territoryless as possible. The international consequences of Israel's decision to prefer expansion to security in 1971 extend well beyond the 1973 war, of which it was the immediate cause. By refusing peace, Israel chose dependency on the United States, the boss man called partner, as one of Israel's leading political commentators describes the relationship. As long as Israel's actions conform to U.S. objectives, it receives the diplomatic, military, and economic support that facilitates its takeover of valuable parts of the occupied territories and its development into a rich industrial society. But when the boss man draws the line, Israel must obey. There have been repeated occasions. One arose in 2005. When the United States ordered Israel to terminate its sales of advanced military technology to China. Israel sought to evade or mitigate the restrictions, but in vain. The United States imposed sanctions. Pentagon officials refused even to meet with their Israeli counterparts, compelling Defense Minister Shaul Mofaz to cancel a trip to Washington. Strategic dialogue was effectively terminated. The United States demanded that the Knesset enact legislation tightening oversight of military exports, that Israel sign an official memorandum of understanding, and that the government and Mofaz present a written apology to the United States. After Israel raised a white flag and acquiesced to most of the demands, Israel's leading military correspondent, Ze'ev Schiff, reported the U.S. made additional, harsher demands and was said to have shown contempt for the Israeli delegation. These are bitter blows to Israel. Apart from the direct insults, these sales are a crucial component of the militarized Israeli high-tech export economy. But Israel has no alternative when the boss man speaks, and understands that it cannot rely on the domestic U.S. lobby, which knows better than to confront state power on important matters. The choice of expansion and associated dependence has had deleterious effects on Israeli society, while foreclosing beneficial alternatives, and it risks consequences that could be quite serious in the unpredictable world of international affairs. While contemplating his visions of democracy and justice, Bush is continuing to crush the most elementary human rights of Palestinians and demolish the basic norms of Israeli democracy. The record of Security Council vetoes concerning Israel is another illustration. Bush II's 7 vetoes of UN resolutions related to Israel match the 7 under Bush I and Clinton combined, but do not reach Reagan's 19. The resolutions vetoed include the call for a UN observer force in the territories to reduce violence, condemnation of all acts of terror and violence, and establishment of a monitoring apparatus, expression of concern over Israel's killing of UN employees, and destruction of a UN World Food Program warehouse. reaffirmation of the illegality of deportation, expression of concern over the separation barrier cutting through the occupied West Bank, condemnation of the assassination of the quadriplegic cleric Sheikh Ahmed Yassin and half a dozen bystanders in March 2004, and condemnation of an Israeli military incursion into Gaza with many civilians killed and extensive property damage. Bush has also gone to new lengths in supporting the occupation by formally recognizing Israel's right to retain West Bank settlements and continuing to provide the needed support for Israel's expansion into the West Bank. That includes support for the separation barrier, designed to ensure that the comfortable Jewish suburbs in the West Bank will be effectively incorporated within Israel, along with some of the most arable land and main water resources of the region, while the remnants left to a Palestinian state will be fragmented and unviable. The separation barrier is to encompass all settlement blocks, creating 3 Bantustans on the West Bank. First, Jenin, Nablus. Second, Bethlehem, Hebron. And third, Ramallah. Meron Benvenisti writes, a particularly cynical component is the virtual encirclement of Palestinian towns and villages, separating residents from their lands, which will, in the course of time, become state lands in accord with the Ottoman laws that Israel has revived, in an effort to disguise its theft of lands with a thin veil of legality. The wall around the town of Kalkilia at Israel's border increases cost and Israeli insecurity, but the town is dying, as intended, by this act of supreme cynicism. The same fate awaits others. Many cases have been investigated by the Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem. To mention just one, the separation barrier around illegally annexed Greater Jerusalem, for which there is not even the slimmest pretext of security. In fact, it enhances insecurity by enclosing many Palestinians within the projected borders of Israel, will result in the complete isolation of the village of Sheikh Saad, just east of the Jerusalem municipal boundary and physically connected to a neighborhood in East Jerusalem on which its residents depend for all aspects of life: health, employment, secondary education, supply of food, and other goods. Located on a cliff, the village has only one road for exit or entry, and that is blocked by the Israeli Defense Forces. Theoretically, residents can submit a request for a permit, which is routinely denied, if they can manage to enter Jerusalem illegally. In this and many other cases, the method is purposeful cruelty, designed so that the residents are forced to decide between living in a prison and abandoning their homes to live elsewhere. Those familiar with the history of Zionism will recognize the method, dating back to the 1920s, dunam after dunam, arousing as little attention as possible. More generally, as Moshe Dayan put the matter to the Labor Cabinet in the 1970s, we must tell the Palestinian refugees in the territories that we have no solution. You shall continue to live like dogs, and whoever wishes may leave, and we will see where this process leads. But quietly, step by step, so that apologists can deny the facts. The separation barrier adopts the basic logic of the Clinton and Barack proposals at Camp David, but goes beyond. In October 2005, Haaretz published a map of the division of the West Bank into blocks. The map shows that the northern Ariel salient is also to extend to the Israeli-controlled Jordan Valley, just as the southern Ma'ale Adumim salient does. The goal is to sever the northern West Bank, including Nablus and Jenin, from its central region, blocking Palestinian traffic, part of the big picture of creating 3 separate blocks in the West Bank. A few weeks later, Sharon informed reporters that Israel intended to keep control of the Jordan Valley in the occupied West Bank, signaling its insistence on retaining settlements there under any future peace deal. It follows that the 3 cantons are completely contained by Israel, Infrastructure development is another device to destroy the remnants of